Please tell me all about Distorted.
Yeah, so we are 10 this year. So we've been going a while. Yeah, and how we describe ourselves is an audio-first content agency. But basically, we make radio shows, podcasts, and we work with clients all over the world, actually, from like artists and musicians to entrepreneurs and big brands that want to make good content. So, yeah.
Am I right in saying that the sort of formulation of the company started more music-based and has moved into podcasting?
Yeah, it did. It was set up by Andy and Nick, and they're well known in electronic music, and we're producers, broadcasters, DJs, and they set the company up. So it did start off in electronic music, working with lots of electronic artists, and we still do. And then we always did podcasts like as an add-on to that for our clients, and it is just, the podcasting side has just grown, and now we work with all kinds of brands, big household names, people from the entertainment, not necessarily music, but, you know, actresses. We have wellbeing clients. And I guess as podcasting's just boomed, people want to make great content and they come to us because that's what we do. So we have a whole team now just on podcasting.
Fantastic. And both of you seem to have northern accents. And it's always nice to hear that there's fantastic organisations outside of London creating amazing content. So tell us a bit about your Leeds roots and how important that is to the business.
Yeah, so when Distorted was founded, the directors were always adamant that they wanted to be based in Leeds, and they had young families and they didn't want to be moving to London, even though everybody at the time was like, you need to be in London. That's where the media is, that's where music is. They were adamant they didn't. They're on laptops, they travel all around the world anyway. They could base themselves from Leeds. So they never did that thing either. They were always very proud of the fact we're from Leeds. So they never did that thing where they like bought a PO box in London and had like a fake address and made it look like it's in London. We were always very, very proud to be Leeds based. Yeah. And I would say now, 10 years on, more than ever really. And I think that we need creative companies outside of London offering jobs and just feeding into that ecosystem. So we're really proud to be from Leeds.
Absolutely. I think it's it's ridiculous that people should feel that, you know, you have to relocate to London if you want to do anything within a creative industry. It's like, creative people don't just live in London. They live all over the country. They live all over the world. It's like, it's a myth that you have to move to London to reach success, I think.
Yeah, well, I would agree. And we're really passionate about that. And also, I think nowadays it's even harder for people breaking into the industry to uproot their lives for, you know, work experience or low-paid internships because everything's so expensive. So it's important that there's more opportunity outside of London as well, where people are from. And then if they want to move down, I mean, I lived in London for 7 years. I wanted to move down and then move back. But people shouldn't feel like they have to. Yeah. And there should be opportunities.
I think we're so much better connected as well. Like, a lot of our clients are global anyway, so it doesn't really matter if we're in London or not because we speak to them online via Zoom. You know, we go and see them. We go to Miami, we go to Amsterdam. I mean, we've made it down to London today. We're on an adventure.
We made it down to London and then out to Essex. So we do leave sometimes.
I got a message. I got a message from the station saying there's two northern ladies and they're lost. You need to come and find them.
You've got lost. They're not from around here.
Fantastic. Well, you mentioned that that you're going to be celebrating 10 years, which is fantastic. What significant changes over them 10 years have you seen within the podcast industry?
A lot. I think the first and the most obvious is in the last few years, it's absolutely boomed and it's really gone into the mainstream.
Everyone wants a podcast, don't they? Every brand or company think, I need a podcast.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's the new hottest thing, and I think when it's done well, it really, really works. And they're seeing lots of famous faces fronting podcasts, lots of brands. So it's that keep it up. But with that, it also there's challenges. I think strategy is now playing a much bigger part than it did, even 5 years ago, where you could just kind of, do one, see how it goes, put it out, maybe change it, go with it. I think that if you're going to invest in it now, you need to have, and you want it to do something, you need to kind of have a plan and not waste the money, because there's a lot more out there. So competition's probably more fierce.
Do you think lockdown was a very important part of the boom?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think so. I think in lockdown, everyone was in. They wanted that community of people. They wanted a voice to be there for them. And I think podcasts helped that. And I think it's definitely caused a big boom.
And that connection as well. I think people wanted to feel connected. And they still do as well, because people are still working from home. I know that there's like a shift and people are now, it's like 50-50, or people can decide. But I think people like that connection, and and they like the fact that you can go niche on a topic and just really delve into the stuff that you're interested in.
I think it's quite DIY, isn't it? And I think in lockdown, people didn't have studios to their disposal.
Yeah.
So people were buying, a USB mic and starting these podcasts to, as you say, to communicate with people and to get a little bit of their sort of creative juices out. And so many people in the creative industries, whether that be musicians, whether that be actors and such, they weren't working. And so I think, okay, well, let's try this podcasting thing. And I think, it becomes saturated at that point. But I think there was people that were doing it to just give themselves something to do through lockdown. And there's other people that fell in love with it and have continued to do it, and they've grown it, and they've then since reached out to production companies to go, right, look, this is what I've created in lockdown. I now want to take it even further.
Yeah, because I think that's the thing. There was what the pandemic had, but I think we're kind of having, I don't know if you'd say repercussions or the effects of that. And now I think where there is a point where it feels saturated, or there's just more people doing it, now people are going, well, how do I level up this? Is the sound as good as it can be? Is the editing as good? Are we bored of flat zooms? Do we need to do extra design? Do we need to do extra this? So I think there's a kind of next stage now from the pandemic where people are looking at how else they use it. And I also feel like we're at a point where maybe social media was 10 to 15 years ago, where now everyone knows, if you're a marketing manager or business owner or anyone really, they know what social media is, and they know that how they kind of have to treat it in their planning. Podcasting is at a point about 3 years ago, we'd have conversations and people would be going well, what is a podcast and do I need one? And that conversation's changed now. People are like, I need a podcast. Yeah. But then we're like, why though? What do you want it to do? Because it feels like it can be a bit of a hot new trend, and people want one because it's the latest thing. But why, what they're going to talk about? Why do they want it? What do they think it's going to do for them? And I think that it's at that point where everyone's kind of feels like everyone anyway is talking about it or wanting one, but maybe the people don't quite know why.
I always look at it as kind of the difference between fashion and style. And I think that so many celebrities now that might have years ago done a fitness DVD, and now I want to do a podcast now because everyone's doing podcasts. And at Pod Bible, obviously we get sent so many podcasts to review, and we have these huge companies sending us these superstars that are starting podcasts. And I'll be honest, I've listened to some of them and I'm like, look, you can tell that for a lot of them, it's just a gig.
Right, yeah, okay, yeah.
It's not come from a place of passion. And whereas there might be somebody that has got no budget, that's sitting at home, but they're so passionate about what they're recording, and it's a way better listen. The production quality might be worse, but at some point this person's then going to step it up. And I think that we have seen that boom where everybody's doing it, but I think the fashion comes and goes. But if you've got something that's stylish, it's always going to be there. And I think that is a really important part of the industry. I think that everybody jumping on it is great because you will get some absolute gold coming through. But I think if you're going to do it and you're someone off the telly or someone off a reality show, you've got to believe in what you're doing. You've got to be passionate about it. And if it comes across as just a gig, the listeners aren't fools. They'll see through it and they're like, there's no passion here.
authenticity and podcasting.
That's the word.
It goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
And that's what I think we talk a lot actually about. One listener of a podcast is worth so much more than, I don't actually want to know what the metric is, but maybe like 100, on social media, like just fleeting through. The connection is just gold and personal. Absolutely.
And you mentioned social media. And I think one of the other things that we all discovered during lockdown was Zoom. And all of a sudden, we initially sort of was using it to connect with nans and granddads and aunts and uncles. But I think quite quickly, and certainly for me as a podcaster, I was like, okay, so I can now do my podcast here. And with a bit of sort of messing around with different mics and recording equipment, it's like, I can do it like this. And I mentioned to you before we press record, I think it kept me sane in lockdown recording podcasts. And I think what we've then got out of that is, yes, we've got our nice audio podcast, but we've got a visual. We've recorded this little screen grab of us having this conversation. And then all of a sudden, I'd never used video before, and I'm cropping it and I'm putting that on my socials going, look who I've had on my podcast. And everybody seemed to be doing that. And I think that sort of brings me on to one of the other sort of significant changes that I think that we should talk about today, which is video. Because I guess the whole ethos of podcasting was audio, but it's evolved so much now that it appears to be a very important part of your podcast is to have video content, whether that be to clip for socials to get new listeners, or just to offer maybe different demographics that prefer to watch rather than listen. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think video is important. But because we're doing a podcast at Distorted at the minute, which will be out soon, and we decided that it definitely needed to be videoed because the demographic of this podcast is 18 to 25-year-olds, and they're probably not as likely to go on a podcasting platform and search it out. They're more likely to find it on Instagram or TikTok, like a 60-second clip. So we've made it look great and sound great, but the video was quite a big priority in our marketing plan. So I think, in that sense, it's very important.
Yeah, I think it really helps with discoverability. So, we'll be reaching an audience that wouldn't necessarily be coming straight to us for a podcast, with the intention that hopefully, after they've followed us a bit on social, they'll end up coming through to the podcast. It's just another way really of reaching them. I think also I'm seeing quite a lot of clients coming to us, and almost like the term podcasting, you've said about it evolving. It feels like it's almost changing, because we'll get some clients that know exactly what they mean by podcasting, but some actually, when you delve into the brief or what they want, what they actually mean is they want long-form video content for YouTube, and they're less fussed about the audio, or they want the clips. So it feels like, I don't know if podcasting is sort of broadening to what we would think of podcasting, to actually just this more kind of in-depth content.
Well, you said something earlier before we was recording, where you said it's a content studio.
Yeah,
and I thought, I'd never even considered that. We're sitting in the Pod Bible studio now, and I just go, we've got a podcast studio, but we're filming this. It's a content studio, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. We've got a studio in Leeds, which we refurbed recently, so it's got 4K cameras, and it was all geared towards video. So we've heavily invested in the video side of podcasting, but it's essentially a content studio. So we get more and more, we'll get YouTubers coming to use it, or people that just want to record kind of like webinars even. I mean, we're always still podcasting first, but I think it's just that like engaging content that people are after. I do think though that there is, so I'm all for video, but there is still a place for just audio depending on the content. So I think where I'm very pro video and it's great for discoverability, we recently did a podcast for the NHS, and it was very sensitive subjects, and also it was quite hard to get accessibility into the hospital. So audio only allowed us such access, And it also broke down the barrier between people, because we were talking about sensitive subjects, and having a camera or lights, you know, in their faces is almost suddenly quite like overwhelming, whereas just a little mic and the audio. And we were also like physically able to go places that we wouldn't have been able to get access to with like, with one person and a mic was much easier than a camera crew. But that was, you know, and that was the sensitivity around the audio only was amazing. It was an incredible story, but that was doing a different job to kind of when somebody maybe wants to do more of like an entertainment based podcast and they want it to reach far and wide, then I think video is like perfect for that.
And to touch on what Rosie said as well, like I do think, you know, the nature of the content, I agree, and it is demographic as well. I think, you know, personally, I still like to take the dog for a walk and sling a podcast on, and I wouldn't wander down the street with a phone watching a podcast.
No, I would. Yeah,
but I'm 51 years of age, whereas I think, you know, when I look at, you know, my daughters and how they consume their media, it's quite fast-moving content on TikTok, and if they find something that pricks their attention, then they click the link, then they'll go and watch it.
Yeah, you've got to be hooked in within that first 5-10 seconds, haven't you? Otherwise, swipe. It's so easy to swipe.
And that's incredible pressure to put on a creator, isn't it? That however good your content is, unless you hook them, and it's the same, we talked about, you know, obviously it coming from the company starting in music, you know, when you look at, you know, the likes of Spotify and these places that are saturated in new music, how do you get people to listen to your music? Unless you hook them in them first 10 seconds of that song, they're on to the next thing. And it's so fast paced. And I do wonder where you think, you know, this industry is going to go. Like, is everything going to become, a podcast going to become more bite size?
I think there's a real trend at the minute for bite size, but again, I think it depends. I do think there's a place for all of it. I think whilst there's been a boom, so more people know about podcasts, we know more people are listening, all different age brackets. Then just like with TV, you know, there's a need for different kinds of podcasts, different lengths. You know, some are always on, some are series, some are big meaty documentaries, some are snappy 20 minutes that you can listen in your lunch hour. Some translate really well to social clips, especially like your kind of more like light-hearted or entertainment. And some actually, when they're really deep stuff, it's hard to translate it into a 10-second clip. So I think it's more though, rather than where we used to be with podcasting, be able to go, oh, well, we'll just press record and we'll see how it goes and we'll put it out and people will eventually come. I think there needs to be much more of that strategy in the beginning to go, well, what do we want this to achieve and who's going to be listening, and then kind of look at the best approach then.
I think 10, 15 years ago, you could have had that approach of like, let's just record it, put it out there, because the market wasn't where it's at now.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It is so saturated now. Yeah, absolutely.
And that comes with the pros and cons of, you know, when an industry gets bigger, that's great, but there's also new challenges with that. And, you know, some are great, some are less so.
Yeah.
I think we'll see more rules and regulations as well, eventually, which... I mean, we were just saying, weren't we? We love the fact that there's not so many rules.
Yeah. The freedom of a podcast. It could be literally about anything. It could be so niche. And then again, like your strategy would be to target that niche group of people with that podcast. So I think that's quite exciting. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think the fact that, you know, it's always kind of been side by side with, I guess the closest thing will be radio to podcasting. And that's a closed shop. No one, you know, everybody would love to be a radio presenter or a DJ on the radio. And it's not easy to do that. And I think having a podcast, anyone can do it. And I think that's so important that is always there, that anyone can do this and create this bit of content and nurture it and grow it. I think the DIY aspect of podcasting is one of the things that I love the most. I don't ever want to see change, because I think that's really guerrilla and exciting.
I think what's also coming through is that the nature of not just podcasting but online and YouTube as well, the effect it's had on kind of more traditional media is that the people are they've kind of got their power back in terms of the creators are creating what they want to create. And if they grow a massive audience, that's because the audience want to hear from them.
Absolutely.
So then the bigger media platforms kind of have to go, oh, yeah, this is what people want.
Yeah.
You know, rather than being told how to present a show or being told what your audience want. And I think that's exciting. So if somebody wants to create a show or wants to be a presenter, they can go off and create it. And if they have an audience, they have an audience.
Absolutely.
I think it's so much more accessible now as well. Like going back to the pandemic, I think that's created that kind of remote working thing that we were talking about a bit. But then in turn, that's like you could record a podcast with a guest from London. Say I'd be in Leeds, I can patch in on Riverside or whatever software, and they'll be in London, and you can record a podcast almost just as good as it would be in a studio.
Absolutely.
And I think that ability has broadened everybody's search for guests.
Completely.
It's a lot easier to get good guests.
Well, it's again, we were speaking about this earlier, the fact that pre-lockdown you'd be trying to align diaries so you could get a guest in a studio, and now it's a case of like, right, you're free for an hour, let's jump on Riverside or Zoom or whatever you want to use, and it is so much easier, and the technology is evolving where you can get fantastic recordings out of this, and I'm loving it. Well, I'm going to ask you now, like, what advice would you give a business that was considering a podcast?
A business, I would always be asking them why they want to start one and what they hope the outcome is going to be, and what they actually want to achieve. Because I think you do need to think about that if you're wanting to do it as a business, because the likelihood is you're going to invest in it and there's going to be set things you want to achieve. And the thing with podcasting is it is a long game. Unless you've got loads of budget to pay for the marketing to get it right up to the top in Apple, it is a consistency game and a community building. So it's not necessarily always going to be a quick win. If it's someone that's completely, natural content creator, completely fallen in love with the medium, then and want to do it as like passion and hobby and see what happens, and they can kind of just, I suppose, start and see where it takes them. But as a business, I would be asking, making sure they know why they want to start it.
It's a big investment for a business, isn't it, as well? Time and money.
Yeah, and I think if they don't think about what they necessarily want out of it, then they'll end up, it might not deliver on where they want it to deliver, and then they might get frustrated. So I think it's just important to kind of outline, why do you want it? What do you want to achieve? And then make sure that, it's explained, the strategy and what they can expect. Because I think the thing is there's a lot of, people seeing success and then thinking, oh, that's really easy. But actually it might have taken someone either a very long time to get an overnight success, or they might have spent a big marketing budget as well.
Yeah. Well, we've spoken about sort of how we've seen, the industry evolve and the expectation now that video has to sort of come hand in hand with audio content and such. Looking ahead, what are you most optimistic about for the future of podcasting? Are we calling it podcasting or content creation?
I think podcasting still. I just think it's just going to get bigger and more things to look forward to and more things to create. And I think there is space for all types of podcasts and all types of audiences and all types of voices. I think that's exciting. I don't think it's something to be scared of. And I don't think it's going to be streamlined into a set of rules that everyone has to follow. But it might be that, there's certain things you might do if you're after that target audience versus that target audience, or that might change a bit. But I think there's scope for just more of it.
Yeah, I think technology as well, that'll grow. And I think we've got to embrace that and use it to our advantage. And I think that is exciting. A lot of people can be scared about how quickly technology's changing, but I think it's going to just keep opening up and breaking down doors. Just
as we come to the sort of end of this chat, I want to ask you to tell me a little bit about some of the things that you're most proud of at Distorted. And I'll start with you first, please, Becky.
So a big project I'm really proud of at Distorted, which is less of an actual podcast and it's more of an industry program, if you like, is an internship that we created with youth music. And it's to, I suppose it's to kickstart the careers of two 18 to 24-year-olds who want to get into audio and or / music. So they've come to us, we've got them in for 8 months, and the idea is that we're completely training them so that they can, one of them will be producing or is producing a podcast, and one's producing a music radio show. And then we're PRing it. We're also mentoring them and coaching them and giving them access to networks so that they can leave and be career ready, or at least next job ready, with a tangible portfolio. So the idea throughout the training is we get hands off with it, and they are literally editing it and making it and figuring out what jobs they like. They're doing all different bits so that they can, really get a handle on, do I want to present? Do I want to produce? Do I want to edit? Do I want to do it all? And I think our industry is, the stats that back this up, so it's not just me, but it is a very who do you know industry. Yeah. And that's not, like, if you don't know, you don't know.
Sure.
So it can be quite closed in that sense. And I think, especially outside of London, there's a lot of traditional routes especially into audio, so maybe more radio, but radio and podcasting that aren't there anymore. There's a lot of community radio stations and local ones that have closed. A lot of the major players have networked, so those jobs tend to be in London. So there's just less ways for people to get in. And I just think it's great that there's online, and that opens up lots of doors for people to just create. Yeah. But how do you find out other bits if you don't know and if you can't ask? And it's really hard to put in time with people. If someone contacts you for like a bit of a half-hour chat about career and you're having a really busy week, it's actually quite hard to get that time in. Whereas if you're in an office or a studio with someone and you're just picking the brains, or just tips, like you might see someone editing in a way and go, do you know there's a quick workaround to that? Try this. Just stuff like that. I think it's invaluable. And, not everyone's great at networking either and meeting people.
Yeah, it's very daunting, especially when you're just coming into the industry. You don't really have a portfolio behind you yet, or the skills to sell yourself. You kind of just got to sell your personality almost, which is a bit unnerving actually. So this is kind of like a more subtle way of networking by having a portfolio and building it and making contacts that way, by
showing what they can do rather than relying on the fact they're going to have a really good interview and get on with someone. It's actually really demonstrating. And I think for us as well, like, there's a lot of noise at the minute about the class ceiling, and there's been some new research put out, and I think the stats of working class people into the industry are at an all-time low. They're the lowest they've been since the 70s, which is pretty scary. And if you're from the north, I believe the percentage is even higher of people not going into the creative industries. And I just think that's terrifying. And, I've got a young son, and you want to think that if they want to go into a creative industry, there's jobs and they're not forced to leave. Yeah. If they want to leave and go to the big city, then that's absolutely fine. I did. I left and went to London for 7 years. I couldn't wait to get down there. But people shouldn't be forced to. And especially at the minute, the cost of living is so high. I just think if there isn't opportunities in other areas around the country, then young people, they're just not going to be able to actually go and start a career in that industry. So that's something that I'm really proud of Distorted, for actually going, okay, then let's actually do something positive about this and get some new talent in, and
absolutely
make a change.
Fantastic. It's so important to offer people them sorts of opportunities. I think that's a fantastic initiative to do. Rosie, just to wrap things up, we're talking about the future of Distorted. You're very much part of that with your new project, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Tell us all about it.
So it kind of goes hand in hand with what we've just been saying about young people getting into the industry. I mean, I went to university in Manchester and I studied music business, and I had my degree in my hand, and I just thought, great, but now what? And I've met these people, but I still am a bit unsure about what I'm meant to do. And I guess that's across every industry, but especially the music industry, you kind of got to forge your own path, I think. And that, again, is very daunting. So we at Distorted have decided to create a podcast that interviews people about their job roles in the music industry, what that entails, the highs, the lows, and I guess advice and a bit of mentorship on how you get to that point in their careers, just to inspire people, if anything. So,
and there's a real variety of roles, isn't there, as well?
Yeah, complete variety. We've got labels, DJs, radio stations, events. So the whole spectrum of the industry. Yeah.
Fantastic.
So, hopefully it does the job.
Best of luck with that. And if people want to go and find out where they can listen to that, and if people have watched this and have a business they're interested in reaching out to Distorted, or people are absolutely intrigued by the initiative that you've set up to get young people involved in the industry as well, where's the best place to find out all things Distorted?
Socials, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at This Is Distorted, or the website, thisisdistorted.com.
Fantastic. We'll tag you in this, so if people haven't found it already, they can find it via the Pop Bible socials as well.
Amazing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us. We have absolutely loved it.
Yeah,
I love your beautiful studio.
It's been nice being on this side of the bench. Normally we're on the other side.
I don't know if it's been nice for me. I'm not a natural.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.